Welcome to the award-winning Women in Healthcare Leadership podcast series brought to you by Medscape Education. Our mission is to educate, advocate, and inspire women in healthcare to lift as they rise. Each episode brings you voices of leaders who are breaking barriers and leading the way in advancing women's health. Join our global community of listeners as we hear from her. Ready to be part of the movement? Let's dive in. Welcome to today's recording of our Hear From Her Women in Healthcare Leadership podcast series. My name is Yelena Spiropoulos, and I'm the Vice President of Education at Medscape. I have two outstanding panelists with me today. I have with me today Giulia Ghibellini, who leads the Patient Engagement Framework at Teva Pharmaceuticals. Welcome, Giulia.
Thank you, Yelena.
And also I have with me Professor Amanda Kirby. She has had many titles and many positions in her career. She's currently a CEO of Do It Solutions and a professor of neurodevelopmental disorders. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
It's truly a pleasure to talk to both of you about a very special topic today, about neurodiversity. But before we get there, I wanted to ask you both about your outstanding careers in healthcare. At the same time, you've had, I would say, unusual professional and personal stories. Can you perhaps comment on how your experiences, although probably difficult at times, ultimately led to your significant personal and professional growth and your truly outstanding careers? Giulia, do you want to start?
Sure. Yes, thank you. I must say, yes, I definitely didn't have a linear career. I am a scientist by training, and I thought that would be what I would do for my entire life. And I did in a sense, but mostly this developed into a passion role. So my current role is a mixture of my personal experiences that I brought to the table and my professional and educational experiences. I thought I would work forever in clinical research. And in reality, right now, as you said, I'm a patient engagement champion that is really much different and than just doing clinical research or developing clinical studies. And this came about through my personal struggles. I have a child that is now an older teenager. There's neurodiversities, and these manifested themselves very early on. And it did affect clearly how I saw the world and how my career could develop because I needed to take care of her needs, understand her diagnosis, and first of all, put her as a priority. I have to say, originally, I saw this as a potential obstacle for having a career. I thought I would have to settle for just being, maybe a bench scientist or something that was not really meeting what I wanted to do, and which was mostly to bring forward my leadership skills. But in reality, her diagnosis and our history showed me that bringing these struggles to the table and transforming them into a new opportunity were really the fuel that created the current role and mission. So really, my passion for helping her transformed into something that was a passion to helping others, and my passion to helping others transformed into the fact that I wanted to make sure that every patient had a role in developing medicines, and all of this sort of creating my vision for what I'm currently doing in my role, which is including the patients and their voice in everything we do at Teva Pharmaceuticals. So was that something that I planned? No, I don't think you can plan to have this type of career. Every step of the career was somewhat of a struggle, but is this something that makes me particularly proud and profoundly connected with my mission and my career? Absolutely. If these struggles didn't happen, I think I would still be a clinical scientist, which there is nothing wrong with, but I don't think that was my mission. I feel that now my impact is to bring the patients into clinical science and into the pharmaceutical companies in ways that is very different. So I would say that this type of life that was given to me, as it happens for all of us, developed into something that made me grow as a person, obviously, as a mother, hopefully as a partner and as an example for other families, but most importantly, as hopefully a model for other women that they are going through these struggles early on in their career, so that they can really see that bringing your full self to work, it's not a negative. In fact, is actually potentially a positive. And if you find the strength in your struggles, you might be able to really aim for having an impact that might go way beyond what you originally planned to have. So that's how I see how my career developed. I'm extremely satisfied where I'm at right now.
And I do think that, what you said is very profound, finding sort of strength in your struggles. And I think that's something that women tend to be very good at. So Amanda, what about you? Do you want to comment in your background also?
Yeah, I've had a really squiggly career. And, I started off as a medic and I was working in family practice and working in adult psychiatry. And that's what I thought I was going to be. And then my middle of three children was diagnosed as neurodivergent nearly 40 years ago, and so long time ago. And I needed to find solutions and answers for him to be able to progress and to show his strengths. And at the time, people thought you grew out of this stuff. That's what I was told. He was going to grow out. So it was rather in an insignificant way. But I knew that when I started talking to parents, I wasn't alone. And often a lot of the greatest support I was getting at that time was from other parents who were working, had different experiences, and were coming with ideas and things. So he drove me to try to find answers, to look for what are we talking about when we have to go from place to place to tell our story? What does it mean when you're using words that people don't understand or mean? And he changed my career. So I went from that to running a transdisciplinary center, from there to having an academic career and reversing into academia backwards. I became a professor, then I did a PhD. So I've done things in a very odd order. That's what I mean by squiggly career. And really recognize that actually, as an individual like Julia, is that your passion to find solutions and ways to help your child led me to write 10 books and do research papers and grow the field because I felt like I wanted to pass that information to other people. And it was and because I was a parent, as well as ending up as an academic and having the clinical skills, who knew? I didn't know at the beginning of that swiggly career. It really made a difference. I think when you are passionate to help your children, and I now have neurodivergent grandchildren as well, so it continues to be the same. You come up with novel solutions that can really have an impact. And I think that drive in a workplace can be really powerful if it's harnessed.
And can you actually explain to our listeners, Amanda, what that actually means? I think that most people, when they think the word, neurodivergent, they think it's somebody who has autism.
They do, and it's something I have to explain quite often in a way. So, two terms: neurodiversity. We're all neurodiverse. If you look at 84 billion brain cells connected in billions of different ways, how complex we are in reality and how variable we are. When people talk about neurodivergence, yeah, quite often they're thinking this is autism. But actually, if we go back to the different ways we think, move, act, process, communicate, we can have neurodivergent traits related to communication. So people might have developmental language disorder, they might have autism, they might have ADHD, they might have dyslexia, they might have dyscalculia, they might have tic disorders, and acquired conditions like traumatic brain injury. So nobody says neurodivergence is owned by autism. It never has been. And it doesn't make any sense either because all of those conditions that I've mentioned overlap more often than they don't. So 70% of people with autism have developmental coordination disorder or dyspraxia as well. 25 to 40% have ADHD as well. We are complex beings, but we love to go, that's what it means. And also assume that everybody's on the autism spectrum is similar, which is clearly not the case. So we have to open that up and go, people have spiky profiles and they have strengths in some areas and challenges in others. And what we're talking about, people who are diverging away from the typical way that education, employment, society operates and do things in perhaps a different sort of way. And when we don't recognize that, those are our challenges. And when we do recognize it, we can harness people's strengths.
Absolutely. And so I want to go back to Julia, because Julia, you also faced a similar challenge in your life. You mentioned you have a child who has
Who has dyspraxia. Actually, that's how I met Amanda. She was the authors of the books that I was reading. I'm kind of the second generation. So I'm hoping I'm speaking to the third generation of parents. And so Amanda and I can actually share our experience for them.
absolutely. But I also wanted to know how that has affected you. Woman, as a mother, as a professional, as a scientist. How has that affected you?
Well, that has affected me profoundly, obviously. First of all, when you have a child that has difficulties, you start looking for reasons for these, and you pretty much always blame yourself. You try to find reasons for which you also have something that was a difficulty, and so maybe it was genetic, or maybe there was something that happened during pregnancy, or maybe you didn't pay enough attention to their development. So I have to say there is a lot of guilt that us as parents live when this type of diagnosis starts surfacing. So then you need to sort of grieve. And after you have done grieving, you need to find solutions. Being a scientist is helpful because we are wired to find solutions. So it's so much easier. That's how I found very quickly Amanda's work. I mean, I cannot believe I'm in a podcast with Amanda Kirby today. Uh, Honestly, Amanda has been, literally 15 years ago, these were the only books that were out there. And I would see her name at conferences. And I had the privilege to get to know her and actually start working with her. So in reality, affects all of you. And you need to really figure out that problems are in everybody's life, right? And your child may have this, or you may have something else, or some disease may develop in your family. And what do you do about it? And so I think in general, mothers tend to suffer more for this because we are carers and we want to find solution. That is not to say the fathers don't. We just approach it differently, and they do try to put themselves as the solution finders, and we need to find solution, as Amanda said, in terms of therapies, so supporting the development, in terms of making it through school, in terms of finding an adult, creating an adult life for our children that is successful, because obviously we want to minimize the disability to the minimum possible so that they will be properly introduced into society and be contributors, because all our children have something to offer to society, obviously. So that challenge is kind of like this constant weight that you have on your mind and you're thinking about all the time, while you are also developing your career and your family and your other interests. One thing that I did want to mention is that it's also the reason why I'm here. It's very interesting. Every conference, as a scientific conference I go to, when we start having like coffee breaks and you start talking to other mothers, typically we talk about our children. And one of the most shared topics is this, is we start talking about our struggles, and there's so many mothers at these conferences that will say, I'm doing what I'm doing right now, working in patient engagement or in patient advocacy, because one of my children, as is often a neurodiversity. It can be also another type of disability. And I found that really is what I want to do in life. I want to help. I want to make sure that I spread the message. So really, there are communities of colleagues that if you only open up and start talking about it, will show up. So the challenges are always the same. We always talk about the same things. We're always talking about new therapies, which Amanda actually has supported in terms of, like, she started talking about neurodevelopment, early intervention. Obviously, not just Amanda, there's a community of therapists out there that is doing this. And we start sharing struggles about school and finding jobs for our children. And this makes us, I would say, different type of leaders when we have this opportunity, because we do want to create roles for people that are like our children. We do want to make sure there is a future for individuals that don't conform with the norm, because we know the value of these people. We see it in our children, if you see what I mean. We can see how they positively impacted our life. And we want other people to realize that having a disability or having a neurodiversity, it's a difference, but it doesn't make you less. And so I really think that that is how, um, uh, how can I say, these challenges that definitely have affected me, they change entirely my perspective on life, have affected me positively. And I kind of want to give this back to community as, a reflection point.
Absolutely. And I really love that how you've turned that around and made it your strength, your superpower. Amanda, what about you? I know we talked a little bit and you've published a ton of this topic, but what kind of challenges have you faced in your career? And, I also see you as somebody who is extremely solutionary.
I'm trying, yeah, and I think that was the bit which was when you presented at the beginning and you go a bit exactly what Julia's saying. You're presenting with a diagnosis and you're thinking, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean for me, my family? What's it going to mean for my child now and in the future? And that was immediately. I am very solution focused. I was trying to go, okay, what do we need to do? And at the beginning, it can feel quite overwhelming because you think, okay, what is going to happen for my child? What is their future? And one of the things I learned relatively quickly in that process was that don't try to do things in too big a chunks. So, so I learned over time, look for 3 years because 3 years is long enough for us to plan for. Don't look at 30 years ahead, but to plan for times of transition. And what I learned from and those conversations you have with other women are so powerful because we share what's working, what's not. And what I've learned from my research as well with parents, with females, is often we're doing compromise. So we're choosing to take a part-time job or not progress as quickly in your career because you're having to be at home to make sure your kids, when they come home, that they are okay and they've had a good day. We are compromising. I think the other bit is to recognize that having those conversations with other females means you're less isolated. And I think in the beginning, I did feel very isolated. You stand there and you go, should I share? Should I not? And the sort of irony about this was only relatively recently, I really thought, actually, I'm neurodivergent as well. And there's that sort of, obviously, lots of other people knew before me, I think, probably. But it was that if only, so I think I'm talking to lots of women and having those conversations like Julia, and a lot of the people are saying, I recognize this as me. And females, parents are actually now waking up and going, no wonder I struggled when I was going through medical school. I was going through training because I had to learn those strategies to and find solutions. It was quite effortful. So I think that's the other bit here, which is really you start to understand yourself, but you have to be solution focused because you're trying to go, okay, where do we go? What's going to happen? What's going to happen for my child? How do I make sure that they're as effective as possible with the skills they've got? And that was really quite frustrating at times because I was being told, "Oh, don't worry, you'll be okay." But that wasn't good enough. He's bright and capable, and I wanted to make sure that those opportunities were going to be open. So I think what I'm hearing from lots of females even today is balancing, right? Balancing the job, balance and flexibility in being able to work flexibly can make all the difference in showcasing your skills. So, companies and organizations and ways to be flexible can mean you've got some really amazing people who've got fantastic skills who can stay and progress, but also can offer great innovation and ideas that wouldn't be there if they have to opt out to not just, but have to do that balancing act.
And you yourself actually ended up, founding and running your own health communications company, right?
I did.
Let's comment on that because I find that fascinating. Yeah.
Well, as I said, I've had a squiggly career, right? And I am hyper curious. I think that's my medical diagnosis probably of the day. So I think that what I found was, and I suppose throughout my career, if there's one thing that is consistent, is I'm really interested in how we communicate effectively, how we communicate in science, but how do we communicate with our patients? How do we communicate cross transitions? So if you're with school, with health, really important. And I'd been doing I don't know, my career always ends up, I don't know how, it's never designed, it really isn't. But I was really interested in how we get healthcare professionals to talk in a way that the public can understand and making sure that the information we were providing was evidence-based. Because that was one of the other things early on when my son was diagnosed as well, that I was offered lots of snake oil, and as parents, you're lured into, "Oh, this would be good. If you do standing on your head and balancing on one leg, that'll cure your child," right? So I wanted to make sure that there was really good healthcare providers talking about subjects in a balanced way, which was evidence based. And so I ended up in the .com era. Shows how old I am, because probably people don't know what the .com era even is. Setting up a health comms company with a couple of people, then grew it to a large team, and we provided health news across lots of domains. So it it that hasn't changed my interest in communication. It's just being delivered in different ways, I suppose, today.
Absolutely. And that actually brings me, it's a good segue into what I wanted to ask Julia, right? Because with the invention of the first internet, right? And now social media, there's a tremendous possibility to create, online communities so the women, parents don't feel so isolated. So, Julia, I know when we spoke last time, you mentioned to me all of your amazing efforts you've done to create a true online community. And that as a result, you even had a chance to speak to the Italian parliament, if I remember correctly.
I mean, this is kind of old news now in the sense that I is about is a 10 to 8 years old news in the sense that what I did for Italy. But as you can tell from my accent, I am Italian, although I always lived abroad. And when it became clear that my child was struggling in meeting typical developmental milestones, I was already living abroad, and so I had some habits which were more typical, I would say, of the USA community, which was to turn to the internet. At that time, social medias were there, but they were not as there as now. And so there were a lot of forums online, and I must say, I made friendships that are to the date real friendships with mothers that started supporting me, and we started exchanging information. And I started realizing, well, wait a minute, this is not existent in my own country. What can I do for it? And it was existing to a certain extent, and mostly I think it's because partially shame, partially because a lot of the resources were not in Italian. And for example, I set out to translate them. And I realized I had to kind of brand it a little bit, and I had to kind of go out there. So although I wasn't really social media savvy, with some other parents, we created an online community that we then transformed into a small nonprofit. We translated a book on sensory integration, which at that time was really not well understood in Italy, which is one of the bases for dyspraxia, and was really the key for me to understand the caring plan for my daughter. And so I started sharing information on the internet in these groups, and we started accumulating a community of parents. And they were not self-help tips. They were more like what Amanda was describing. I was trying to, as a scientist, finding true sources of, neurodevelopment support, and also looking for therapists. They were either willing to be trained or they already had some training. And so we created also that community. The book we translated was actually published by a editing company that was run by people with autism. So I have to say, this was really how, in general, my life was revolving around. I was thinking, how do I create resources for children with disability, utilizing the disability community, but also encouraging, parents to look for solutions soon. What Amanda said resonated with me. Your child will grow out of it. That's what was told to most of us. Our children did not grow out of it. Our children worked very hard to find coping mechanisms or to find solutions to function in the with the demands of the social world and schooling that is around them. So you don't grow out of this, and if you don't give the children the right solutions, they will never reach their maximum potential, which is definitely there. Everyone is highly intelligent but cannot really surface this intelligence if obviously the deficits are there and they're not treated. So I started publishing online, and I didn't think this would go anywhere, to be honest with you. Then I started connected with professionals like Amanda and others, geneticists, and I actually ended up having 5 publications in the, community of connective tissue disorders, which was really not my specialty. And that's when I started realizing, look, I can really have an impact. What I didn't realize, I was having a much larger impact than what I thought. Through social media, somebody in the Italian parliament actually picked up what I was talking about in terms of early intervention. And I did get invited as as a speaker to the the Italian Commission on Childhood Development. And so I was interviewed, and I was able to actually give sort of an overview of what was available abroad and what would be better to do within the Italian system, where early intervention was not as strong as it was in other countries, talking about outcomes. It's very obvious that if you intervene very early with the right therapies, the brain will develop more typically, and so you will struggle less later. And it was an incredible opportunity. It was a lot of responsibility that I didn't expect to have to carry as just a mother of a child with a disability. And it made me realize that speaking up, finding solutions, it doesn't really do any good if you just do it for your own family when you find these solutions. And such as Amanda did, I became sort of an advocate globally for what I could. And I always carried this with me. So I believe that, while social media is definitely a place where there is definitely a black hole. I would say sometimes you don't know what you put in, what will come out of it. But if you use it the right way, doing disability advocacy via social media and doing disability education via social media is extremely strong. And I found out throughout my experience that really can change people's trajectory. I know I touched the life of many children. Um, and that was obviously my intention when I set out for it, but I didn't expect it to reach that level of success, if you see what I mean. And to me, success is any person that you can have influence positively. As a child, as a family, you definitely had a successful, outcome. So that was my experience with social media. I became more involved in my role after I returned into corporate. Yeah, what Amanda was describing before in terms of career path, I had to do the same. I had to take setbacks. I had to not look for promotions. I had to get out of the corporate world where there was a clear career expectation and work as a consultant for years. But during that time, as I said, I created this nonprofit. I was able to have other type of influence. I became more of an advocate. And when I felt I was strong enough, and especially when I saw that there was a path for my child, which I think is when the fog, lifts. When you know there is a hope, when you can see the path, and that is actually what I want to tell all these women that hopefully will listen to this podcast and will find hope and some answers. I was like, I'm ready to go back to corporate. Ready to give back. And when I got back into corporate, I immediately joined our internal organization that was supporting employees with disabilities. And I became an advocate back into corporate. So I really think that, all of this it becomes part of you. And the social media experience for me was quite terrifying. It's still a little bit terrifying. I use LinkedIn very perfectly. But for example, I'm one of the major reposters of Amanda's posts because I think they're amazing. And she has incredible newsletters. So I always send the parents I meet, throughout my career to her resources. Um, I do think this is really important. This is self help. It makes you feel part of a community. It makes you connected with a community. And this community is not just parents. This community is educators, is therapists, is doctors. And I think it's very important to make sure that community is a real community of experts. Parents are also experts. And many of us with roles in different type of industry should take the leading role in diffusing the right information, making sure that everybody is well informed and knows where to find the tools to help their children or their family members or whoever they meet to thrive. So that was my experience. It will continue to be my experience, I think, and hopefully in this new role that I have, it would be amplified so that I can bring in this experience also in how we develop treatments and support for patients.
And for women and many other mothers and women who are facing similar challenges that you have. So that brings me to my very last question. And I'm going to ask you both the same question, but in a slightly different way. Because I think, the more we're talking, the more I realize that I'm also probably neurodiverse. So I'm going to start with you first. How do we then generate opportunities for a future generation of women who we hope are going to become leaders, just like you have? So how do we, mentor them, support them, guide them so that they can excel both personally and professionally?
I think it's an interesting question because it sort of, first of all, says, what does a leader look like? And I think, as female leaders, we can look like female leaders. And I think sometimes in the past, we've tried to emulate being a leader of what a leader looked like, or we thought a leader looked like. And I do think the leaders of the future, and I'm hoping females will be there, you know, really showcasing skills and experiences what we bring to the party. By definition, if we've got children and we've had these experiences, we're bringing things to the party that others haven't experienced. So, and I think if you look, I am an eternal optimist. I try to be. And I think one of the things that we're going to need for leaders of the future is creative thinking. It's about innovation. It's about empathy. It's about communication. It's about networking and understanding and recognizing the different sorts of talents that people can bring to the party. So I actually think that we need to feel proud about showcasing those skills that we've got and also not hiding where we've gained those skills. So I think when I was my younger self, I wouldn't have talked about perhaps the things I'm doing at home with my children and the things that I'm learning with from my friends and the places, all the different connections that happen outside work as well as in work, and wanted to present a much more formal perspective, that camouflaging that I think women are particularly good at doing. At saying, this is me, this is my work self, and I better not show the other parts of who I am, the bits that show my strengths and also show my failings, and show that actually I've had to try this 3 times before I got it right. So learning from our failings, and I think that's one of the things when you talk to other women, and what I love is that we can be quite honest with each other, and we can go, that was really hard. That was really difficult. I made a mess of that. And we can sort of joke about that, but not think that's a failure. So I think for female leaders of the future is having that honesty to say that when we share, and like Julia said about sort of the social media, some of the stuff I've got a newsletter on LinkedIn. I've got 160,000 followers every week that subscribe to it. Okay. I just write stuff, right? I just write things that are annoying me, that are irritating me, that I think that I've talked to somebody, have had an interesting conversation. And I think that the female leaders, when you start sharing the parts of you that you've learned and you can share with other people, means that we can bring young females that are coming into professions and moving through to say, you can do this in a squiggly way. You don't have to do it in a stepwise fashion that says this is how you do it. And I think, Julia and myself are just examples of that. That actually, when you do the squiggles, you're learning so much along the way that is really valuable to that leadership journey. So I would go have a squiggly career and celebrate it, really.
It was kind of interesting. I think our thoughts were exactly the same. How you do it, you share it, and you lead by example. I think that really is what you do here. You're not afraid of sharing your struggles, sharing your failures, and sharing how those failures generated the next version of yourself and showing up as, the phoenix, and how you flew out of these ashes. I also think that the other thing that we ought to do is to make sure that we create an environment where this is celebrated, accepted, and valued. And so in some ways, we need to create a new legacy, elevate women, so that those criteria that were applied to the old leadership model are not going to be applied to the new leaders model. This new leaders model needs to be a person that can be 100% themselves, that they don't need to hide their struggles, but they can actually show how they became as strong as they are from the struggles. So I do think that having models definitely helps, as every time having representation helps. So more female leaders, I would encourage people to share their struggles, talk about them, talk about the solutions that they found. And I think females, we live in communities much more. I mean, at least that's my impression, much more than males. So find your support group, find your fans, and band up with them and create that movement that will really move the needle. And I think a female movement that will bring this towards, we are mothers, we are possibly all neurodiverse. I mean, neurodiverse is a spectrum, so I'm sure there is a little bit of difference in each of us, but bring your difference to the table to build a new future woman leader that is highly compassionate, that is highly inclusive, and that is able to create a new industry standard for everybody to have a role in the industry. And having, to me, and that's what you would do, you need to have the leadership that understands that. And so we need to take a step forward, show up, and for now, we lead, and hopefully the next generation will lead even better because they figured out what we didn't do right yet. So that's really what I would do.
And also mentoring. I think that's one of the things which is a real pleasure and a joy to mentor women and to have those discussions and to share that. I think that's a joy of leadership, isn't it? Really, is having those opportunities so that you can learn along the way.
Yes, and I think the mentoring piece, it's a natural development of leadership. It's very often if you show up as a genuine leader, then other women will actually ask for mentorship, again, through experience or to just conversations. And making the time for that is very critical to me. Making the time to be there for other women is also very important. So that's what I tell everybody that works with me. Currently, my team is a matrix team, and the majority of the team members are women. And I don't think is, just by mistake. This is by default. If you see a representation and you want to go towards that goal, you will join and you will become the next generation. And I can't wait to see these women rising and see what they can cook up for the company.
Absolutely. And my key takeaway for today is that this podcast, this episode will definitely leave a legacy behind. So, with having said that, I want to sincerely thank both of you. It's been a true pleasure. And for everybody who is listening, please tune in to our next episode of our Hear From Her Women in Healthcare Leadership podcast series. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To our listeners around the world, thanks for joining us today. Tune in as we continue our journey to amplify the voices of women leaders in healthcare. Hear From Her is brought to you by Medscape Education. Please subscribe to Hear From Her on your preferred podcast channel and follow us on LinkedIn. Until next time, remember to lift as you rise.